Which button is it over here? Is it just the top?
Delete.
Alex?
The button?
Yeah.
It should be the record button. Yeah. I think no.
It's this one back.
Yeah, it's that one.
Yep. Now
Cool, it's recording.
It's recording.
You're still getting it from there?
This one's recording.
Nothing
Those
looks
are
weird.
recording. Nothing looks strange as far as I can.
Are we streaming yet?
We are streaming.
We are currently live?
Yeah.
We are currently on the internet.
I was going to take a selfie of us to promote the episode, but last time I did that, it got stuck as the actual preview thumbnail.
Don't care.
It was the
I have
worst.
actually really good selfie arms.
You do.
My wife has. That's like the only good pictures I can take of me and my wife. She hates when I try taking a picture.
Is that like dirty talk for you guys? You have good selfie arms?
Yeah, that's appropriate. We're live streaming. It's her birthday. Happy birthday, Whitney.
Happy birthday, Whitney.
I have a happy birthday, Whitney pin on.
Aww.
Where's your pin?
I don't know. I just made crude jokes instead.
Yeah,
Happy birthday, Whitney. So
live streaming now. Twitch.tv
Twitch.tv
/ the MMcast. This is the pre thing that we're doing now. Live streaming now. Just tweeted that out. Hello, people of the internet. My name is Alex Kessler. I am your host of this podcast, and this is the pre-show. This is the pre-live stream pre-show.
This is us live right now.
We're live. Ben can see us on the YouTubes. We're also
Watching
on Twitch.
ourselves.
So if you can find us on twitch.tv / the MMcast or YouTube or Facebook. We're also Facebook Live on our Facebook group, the Official Mentions of Modern Podcast. You can find us all those places. This show is here for now, and then we'll eventually live in other places. There'll be an official announcement on how all of this scheduling and content release is going to work. So get hyped during the
exciting
regular
times.
show.
It's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of change. We're in a period of change and adjustment.
There was like some issues last week. Hopefully they're fixing. Please, people in the pre-show, how's the audio? Because last time we were missing. Now we're doing good. Is the audio recording? The recording recorder.
We are
recording.
We're doing all
and
of
the camera's
our
recording. Dope. All right.
All of our checks.
So in 3 minutes the show starts. 1 a.m. start time. 1 p.m.
1 p.m. Yeah,
1 p.m.
So this is like the pre-show. You guys get to hang with us. Eventually, as Alex mentioned, this will be trimmed off. So this is only special for you guys and for patrons.
Yeah.
What we're doing now is that every single week we're going to take the full unedited, unadulterated show, and we are going to send that full link to patrons. And then the non-version, the version that's edited with card images and all that, will be, I think, be the final version. As Alex mentioned, we're solidifying all of our release plans, and that's coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
But you guys have noticed probably something pretty cool. It's just that on Mondays now, I believe it's on Mondays, right?
Well, I'm going to wait till during the actual episode to do the shout out. We can do a pre-shout out and a during shout out. Continue. Do your thing.
I was just going to say, you guys probably have noticed now that there's extra content. There's little hot take videos that are coming out on Mondays. So we're solidifying the release schedule of all content. And when 2020 starts, and we've kind of been in the new setup for a little while, I think we'll probably have a more official schedule that you guys can follow and know what's going on. But we're trying to live stream more often, all of those things. So I'm going to look here and see a few people. Looks like people, I think the audio is good. That's great.
Cool.
Let's see.
My plan, I think the way we're going to do this is you're going to see the YouTube chat. I'll see the Twitch chat. Ruben will see all the chats, as well as on the screen right here. There's all the chats.
Yeah, and periodically throughout the show, one of the things that we've talked about that we're going to try doing now is we want to be able to read and shout you guys out. We're going to kind of save shout-outs for the end of segments so that we don't derail ourselves in the middle of thoughts, because Alex and I get very excited about our thoughts, and shouting out every single chat in the middle of it can, obviously can go off the rails a little bit. So be sure to leave your thoughts here, and we will look at the end of segments and be sure to read stuff out. Super chat, if you're having a good day, week, month, or year, and if you guys want to support there, I'm just going to read a couple of these people in the early chat before we go live, which is 1 minute. Looks like Alexandra Rosales says, give them likes. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Likes are fine. We need, every time you are like, ooh, these guys know what they're talking about, or don't know what they're talking about, or their audio is good, or they look great, or we look terrible, or I woke up literally with this hair today. It was my wife's birthday, and she was like, I'm going, but I agreed to drive her there. And
Hashtag
so
woke up like
jumped
this.
out the bed. Yeah.
Let's see. Welcome back, Ben, says Tim Foley. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that.
The end of that was make sure to at any
Yes.
time, any moment you're like, maybe I should like this, you should just hit that thumbs up button.
Ken Your Dome. That's Jeff Roberts, who's a longtime listener of the show, says, catching up with Ben on SEN Live. I was on this morning for the first hour of the show, and then the MMcast goes live. Well, it's true. Back-to-back shows today.
Tuesdays, Live Ben show? Live Ben Tuesdays?
Yeah, I do seem to go on. I've been going on SEN for the morning portion of the show, the first hour, and Tuesday, yeah, seems to be that way. So, hello from Switzerland, Masters of Modern Forever, says Clint. Clint, thank you so much for watching live from Switzerland. What time is it for you, Clint? What time is it in Switzerland for you? Ruben's doing. He's doing
9
that.
hours. It's 9 hours, so it's 10 p.m. See, now we can hit Europe.
Yes.
Okay, it started. It's 1 p.m. Music. And welcome back to Masters of Modern. I am your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host, Ben Bateman.
What's up, everybody? Back in the house. Back sitting next to Alex, talking magic. Very excited.
Today we got Ruben Bressler on the producer's chair. You can see him in the little camera. If you're watching this in camera mode, down to the right, he'll be interacting with you, Twitch and YouTube chat, and all the chats, as will we, to the best of our ability, and distracting ourselves. There's a few announcements we're doing today, but first let's talk about what we're going to talk about. We're talking about the recent banning announcements in every format but us. We dodged it. That was me dodging. For people watching, I dodged.
He dodged the banning.
Dodged the banning. A lot of big news there. We have conversations, a little bit of just power levels. We want to have a discussion. Wizards released during the banning process a little bit of their philosophy towards power level and cards they're printing going forward, and where they think they've been doing so far and how they're going to be moving forward. So that's going to be a cool discussion we're going to have. And then we're going to maybe at the tail end, if we get enough time, do a little bit of a conversation on free cards and are they good?
Yeah, well, because I think there was a number of bannings. We will get to that. We do want to talk about the power level of Modern, of Pioneer, the necessity of bannings in Standard, and all of those things. So if you guys are tuning in live, if you're watching the live stream, thank you so much. Leave your thoughts below in the comments. If you're not, if you're watching this as a YouTube video, leave your thoughts below, your comments. Share them. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree? Yeah, and follow along with all the places. We do have a Twitter at the MMcast. You can find Cass at Kess Wiley and me at Ben Bateman Media. Those are the main places, and I think the rest of the shout-outs let's get to later. I think we should get to the...
So I do want to... so there's an announcement that I wanted to do first at the beginning of the episode on kind of just the content and how content is going to work on the podcast. So you may have noticed that we've started doing live streams. We were previously doing them at kind of a 7 p.m., 6 p.m. PST time, and we're moving that. So now... every Tuesday at 1 p.m. we'll be doing the live show. You can make sure to catch it. We had a lot of people want to be able to catch it that were going to bed early. It wasn't really hitting the East Coast in the way that we wanted. So this gives all of you a better chance of seeing us live. We'll be on YouTube and Twitter, so you'll be able to get us at both places. So that's one of the really exciting pieces of news. Now, every Thursday, hopefully, previously it was Fridays, but now we're moving it to Thursdays. The plan is to release the edited video version with good audio and all the card art everywhere. So if we mention a card and you don't know what it does, that's the best place to see it. So it'll be the fully edited version. The live stream gets turned off as soon as we're done and made only available to our patrons. And then so they get kind of all of the pre-show and all of the random stuff. If we get in an argument about something dumb, you can find that on the Patreon. The audio version of the episode should come out the next day, so on Wednesdays, so tomorrow for those people. If you want to just audio listen to this, if you're driving, don't watch videos and drive, it's dangerous. And then the last thing is we're going to start releasing what we call MMcast Hot Takes, and those will come out every Monday on the YouTube channel, and they'll be small 5 to 10 minute videos on a specific subject matter. Sometimes they'll just be kind of something we talked about on the podcast earlier that week, and sometimes there'll be a whole new thing that was maybe inspired by Patreon or the different live stream chats that we'll do a brief little conversation, and that'll be its own new video every Monday. Those are kind of the new content release schedule. There'll eventually be probably some infographic that I make, and it'll look like medium because my graphic design skills are medium.
We could always use someone else.
Maybe. One day. Yeah, not Ruben. And with the help of Patreons, we might have better infographics. So if you guys can go check out the Patreon, you get the full raw video to watch at your leisure, as well as a bunch of other cool stuff. Like we did a deck tech earlier 2 weeks ago from a $10 patron. You get access to the special Patreon-only Discord and a bunch of other cool stuff. So definitely check it out. Thanks, everyone, and let's get started with the actual episode.
Yes, 100%. So the big news on Monday this week was that there was a banning. There was several bannings, in fact. In the standard format, there was a banning of Oko Thief of Crowns, the card Once Upon a Time, as well as Veil of Summer. Those are 3 cards. I think when we had referenced the last 2 weeks, we expected those probably to be... Those were probably the cards that were going to get banned. I think I didn't agree that all 3 would go. You actually were on the train that all 3 were going to go.
I thought those would be my pick. The other 2 cards that were kind of like in contention in Standard were Oko and not Oko, sorry, were Goose and Nissa
Yeah.
Shakes the World. Nissa's not a card I can see being banned. I mean, maybe one day, but I don't think that was really an issue. Goose was like the one that was more on the line to me, because it is in effect that previously they'd be like, oh, this is too good, we don't want to have this, but I think they were correct in getting rid of.
If you get rid of Oko, then the Goose is a lot more defensive.
Yeah.
And
It's a lot less powerful, and so I think they made the right choice on those 3 cards. Veil of Summer was like very projected from Pioneer. The Pioneer banning last week on Veil of Summer, like that was the one that I was like, oh, that's a lock. They're not going to ban it. Yeah.
So we'll get into each of the cards here in a second, but most interestingly for us and for the formats that we pay the closest attention to, there were no bannings in Modern. There were no bannings in Pioneer.
Dodged it again.
And there was a banning in Legacy. Ren and 6 is gone, which is a card that I think Modern Horizons is such an interesting set, just because like all the cards that came out of Modern Horizons, you knew the power level was really high and you weren't really sure where they're going to land. That card in particular was just like, how did you guys go so far from the 2-mana Planeswalker that was red you printed once to this one and not miss how insanely overpowered it was?
Well, I don't think it's insanely overpowered in Modern where they're aiming for. I mean, Legacy has Wasteland, right? That's the reason it was banned in Legacy. It wasn't just like, oh, this card's generically good and valuable. It's like, oh no, it can lock people out of the game on turn 2 as a Legacy, as a Wasteland lock. And when you don't have Wasteland, even in Modern, Ren and 6 is very good in Modern, but Jund isn't the best deck.
Right.
Like, it's not more powerful than Urza is, I guess. And maybe if they do deal with Urza in the long run, then Ren and 6 becomes problematic. But even then, like, there's enough tools to answer it in the format. And that's, I mean, one thing we're going to talk about when we talk about power level is, and we talked about on this week's Hot Take, which was like Lightning Bolt and Pioneer and like the power of answers. And I think Modern has the tools to deal with Ren and 6 as long as it's not Wasteland locking people out of the game.
Yeah, you can't design for every format at once. You just can't. And even if you're coming out with a premium supplemental set like Modern Horizons, which kind of fits somewhere in the middle of power that you're designing for, you still can't protect the Wasteland lock and Legacy while still making the card good in Modern. It just is what it is. But I do think it's interesting that card still seems so obviously overpowered to me. I mean, it's like hard to miss that would have happened in Legacy when you're even looking at the card at face value. Like, you can just get Wasteland back every turn. How are we missing that this is just like exactly what's going to happen with this, and this will never last?
I think they're just prepared to ban it in Legacy. I don't think Wizards cares too much about what happens in Legacy. It's not a format that they care a little bit, but the support of the format isn't exactly like through the roof, to the extent that SEG has even cut most support for Legacy for next year. So from that perspective, they're just like, I don't think they also care if like they print something that's busted in Vintage, right? Like, they don't worry about that. And if something is so problematic they have to deal with it, it's fine. Most of the value people have in those sets are such older cards that like, if Ren and 6 is printed, and needs to be banned, people's collections aren't tanked.
Yeah, it's like if you spend $80 on a Ren and 6 and they ban it, you've already spent like $1,000 or like $2,000 on other cards in your deck.
On one card in your deck.
So like it's just, and then the last piece of banning or restriction news was that Narset, part of Veils, was restricted in Vintage.
And speaking of kind of power level, I do think one thing, and this kind of speaks to Oko as well, is Wizards assumed the power level of Planeswalkers. They like kind of decided to take a leap and like do them differently than they were doing them before, and have learned a lot of lessons through that process. But Narset's a good example, Ren and 6 is a good example, and Oko is a good example. I mean, 3 walkers were banned in this ban list announcement, and to be totally honest, I can imagine more over the next year happening, especially because the way Wizards can react to stuff, right? They create cards so ahead of time that we're basically locked in at least until next fall on what cards are going to be being printed. So the Planeswalkers in Theros, the Planeswalkers in the following set, which will be Ikora. Sure. Ikora, Land of the Behemoths, lines. The next M set, which will be Teferi focused, and then the following Battle for Zendikar. I can see all of them having very powerful Planeswalkers already kind of printed in them, and there's nothing they can do about it.
And this goes back to the original. This goes back to the original set of Planeswalkers. I mean, this is why we got Jace. This is why Mind Sculptor was so good compared to the original set, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're not designing for 3 months or 6 months, and then you're just changing it all right as soon as those cards hit market. You've still got a year and a half, 2 years ahead that are pretty much locked in by the time you're even seeing cards in packs. Mm-hmm. So that is what happens, and I think you're correct that there will be more cards banned. I think one of the things about the 3-mana Planeswalker conversation and the 2-mana Planeswalker conversation that's so interesting to me is that as someone who's played Magic as long as I have, and like really, really loves the clever interactions that they've created, the backwards compatibility of Magic is one of the most fascinating things. I mean, we look at this card, Claim Fame, one of our preview cards. What I like about Claim Fame so much is the way that it interacts with a card like Mir Superior or a weird card like Apocryphite being your graveyard. And these cards that you can get into play with it in a way that it's not intended. There's so many ways to interact with creatures. You know, drawing them, discarding them, resurrecting them, blinking them. The game, every single set, designs in some way to have that interaction. There's not like a consistent swath of effects that like get a planeswalker of a certain mana cost from your graveyard for a cheap sorcery or instant that's kind of ubiquitous. Like there's not a lot of things that blink planeswalkers for cheap, efficient mana costs. The way to use a planeswalker correctly is to design it at the right rate, play it, and have it be good. And their thought was you can attack a planeswalker, so you can get rid of them easily, and they can be at this power level because of that. And what they missed, obviously, as they admitted with Oko, is that like that's not really totally the case anymore. And there's 2 years of these things now that kind of invalidate the theory. And I want to talk about that.
Yeah, and something to kind of look at is it's really about board presence, right? With the 4 mana and 5 mana planeswalkers that have just been kind of classically good for years, but were kind of getting boring, you would play them, and at that point of the game, it was always possible for your opponent to have something in play. Or they're fine printing straight up 3 mana destroy target planeswalker or creature cards, Hero's Downfall obviously being the prime example. And so there's always ways to kind of deal profitably with a 4 or 5 mana planeswalker. 3 mana walkers come down so early that it's really difficult for decks to already have something in play that can start attacking it. And it's also at a point in the game where like literally fog effects gaining you life and then still having value off of it are so valuable against aggressive decks that it really doesn't give anyone kind of a position to be able to fight against it. And like I think with all of the planeswalkers that we're seeing issues with, one of the issues is they come down at a time where the only way at that point to answer them is to be retroactively attacking them or retroactively answering them. And we talked about this on the episode last week where different ways for white to maybe be able to answer planeswalkers proactively was giving it mana leak or giving cards. Someone brought up that on Twitter and maybe in the comments that Kitesail Freebooter effects being moved towards white so that they have a way to deal with it instead of doing attacking, do like hand discard exile effects that then by killing that creature you can get it back. And that's another way to maybe give another color proactive answers to it, because the problem right now is unless you counter it, they get value off of the planeswalker.
Yeah, I think also like if you look at the difference between say previous 3 mana planeswalkers that were printed and the way you would use them, take one of my favorite cards of all time. Saheeli is a card I've always loved. I've always felt Saheeli was underrated. But the thing about Saheeli is the most value you're getting off Saheeli, if you're not comboing with Cat, is it's coming down on turn 3 or maybe a little later in the game. It's minusing 2, leaving it 1 loyalty to copy an artifact or a creature that probably has an ETB effect. You're getting like the extra value, right? If that's what you're getting, the minus. Versus, and what you're left with is a 1 loyalty planeswalker that doesn't really have a whole lot of value until you plus that up again. If you look at Teferi, if you look at Narset, if you look at Oko, these are cards where the thing that you're getting is not the minus ability. You don't play Narset Parter of Veils because you're going to get 1 activation off of a search for Azcanta. Like, you're playing it because it means they can't draw more than 1 card. That's what you're left with. You get the card, but they're also left with that effect. When you play Teferi, it's not that you draw a card and bounce a permanent you're getting for 3 mana. It's the fact that now they can't cast things unless they're sorceries on their turn, right? Oko, you're not playing it because you get to minus and do something cool. You're playing it because now you have this giant fog machine that's going to swap things. Like, that's the difference between the design theory on these planeswalkers, and I think some of the 3 mana ones they've pushed in the past is what you're left with is not the kind of slow version of the minus effect that old planeswalkers would really focus on. And you see it all the time now. And I think that's the design philosophy that changed that probably it'd be best to get away from a little bit. I don't think that they make the game more fun. Like, I just don't.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think that they're figuring stuff out. Like, look at Domri Raid, right? The 3 mana Domri Raid or the 3 mana Vivian that were in War of the Spark. Those are fine. Like, they're fun to play with. They're proactive.
Sure.
They like make the game plan more attractive. I think these like 3 mana planeswalkers that increase your board state are generally going to be more fine within the format than the walkers that end up being more control heavy, right? Where like Teferi stops your opponent from doing something. Even Ashiok, like the amount of times I've played it in Brawl because I have an Ashiok Brawl deck on Arena, every single person I play against messes up and like cracks an Evolving Wilds or like tutors for a card, and they're just like, oh right, Ashiok makes it so I can't do anything. There's so many of these like weird niche case hate effects that make it really hard for people to deal with. And then you add the fact like Oko, where it's proactively just stopping you from doing anything. Like any creature you play after Oko basically either has to have an ETB that wins you the game or is an invalid effect and artifacts. And so when you have they can do these cool planeswalkers, but they really need to be cognizant of is this a control card or is this a proactive card? Because when planeswalkers are proactive, they further the game state, they end the game. But when they're played there to be reactive, that's when you start running into more issues.
Yeah, one of the things I thought about a lot with Oko, and by the way, last night in Arena, I literally on the play had Drown in the Lock open on turn 3. I was like, what's the worst that can happen? I was playing the mill deck. I had already milled 3+ cards. And I just like tap out and they cast Oko on turn 3, and I was like, "Well, this was fun." I hadn't played against Oko Unlimited yet. It's so brutal and not fun. It was so outlandish. Like because again, I was getting back surgery. I missed a lot of the early Oko hype. It's only recently that I've started to actually play with it and against it.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Was that a pun? Because you said back.
It was. It wasn't intentional.
And I was blown away by it. And I started thinking about what are the things that make Oko so powerful outside of the obvious, right? Outside of the fact that it pluses to do both things, right? Like people are used to it. Its interaction with the card with the type of artifact is just another one of these things where it's like the innocuous nature of how powerful that is. That there are so many things in Magic that are, like it fits into these Urza decks in Modern because like. It's good anyway, even if it wasn't making artifacts. If it made enchantments instead of artifacts that were food, it would still be a very good card. It would still do a lot of the same things.
Sure.
But the fact that it's making these artifacts that just slots into all these other strategies that have already been good for so long makes it like it's very hard to design. I mean, it's a difficult card to avoid that in design.
But I think that interaction is actually good, right? Like I think the fact that different decks in Eternal formats can interact with the artifact tokens that Oko is making is a benefit. We're getting the effect of this is not a card that's only going to be insularly work with food strategies and standard. That's always worse. Like energy cards are unplayable unless you're playing an energy strategy, right? I'd much rather food be cool and interact with Urza decks, and I don't think Oko being in Urza decks is the reason that Urza decks could be a problem in Modern. I think that's just a cool feature of the card, and if Oko wasn't as big of a problem as it is in Standard, it would be one of the coolest cards printed for Modern play, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think my realization from it, so I've focused on the Urza decks. I paid a lot close attention. Those decks are very refined. They do their job really well. The place that I started thinking about this and noticed was we talk about Highlander Gauntlets sometimes, and I've had this 4-color artifact deck for years. And I was like, well, why not just add a 5th color and just put Oko in the deck? Because the card's really good anyway, but it also makes artifacts. So it's just good with everything else this deck that's combining all the best multicolor artifact effects for years does anyway. Like, why not just put it in? Because it's already insane, but also all these other cards that reward me for having more artifacts makes Oko even better. And I was like, wow, that's really pushed.
Right, and I mean, it's I don't know if it's push. I mean, it's an artifact card, right? Like the fact that you would just want to play. I mean, especially in green, where like the benefit I've like looked at making green-based artifact decks, and almost always it's like, oh, there's actually not that many good ones.
Totally.
You get the land, but so I think that Oko's power level is more in the fact of it negating just every strategy it goes into and its loyalty, right? I think, and even the article that Wizards put out was, we pushed these numbers a little too high. It should have been a minus. It should have been a +1. It shouldn't maybe have been able to target your opponent's things, or whatever we had. We had something that was less fun. That was the original card. So when we made it this, we were like, oh, this isn't as good as mind control, which is what Oko was doing originally as its minus. So then we made it a plus because that seems way less strong. And then in reality, it's beast withinning every turn, or better, because there's no way to really interact with that. So
I mean, I asked you this offline beforehand, but I'm curious about this. What about if Oko had been, if the Elk ability was just a minus ability? Like how do you not look at the card initially and just go like, that's 100% what this should be? What's the justification for having 2 pluses and no minuses on the card? Like, is there any...
Especially at 3 mana, right? Like,
I don't even get it. I'm thinking about it. I'm just like, was it like a typo and they just didn't want to own up to it? I don't even understand how that's something you come up with.
No, they explained. So what it was is originally it was a minus, but it was a mind control effect. So it was supposed to be like, it comes down and then it either the trades with the creature or it takes control of a creature, I think is what they were saying. And so when they changed it to the elk making ability, which was also more flavorful with the story, they were like, oh, okay, so we don't have to this could be a plus because elking a thing is not as powerful as eventually mind controlling
Sure.
a thing, right? And they were just wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I don't actually think it was a typo. And I read the article, and I understand where they're
Yeah.
coming from. They got so deep down the rabbit hole of design that they missed just the raw power of the ability by the end of design. But so we've talked about Oko on this show a lot. So I think moving on to some of the other things that were banned and sort of just that conversation about Magic's power level is a good place to go.
Right.
So one of the cards was Veil of Summer, which is, maybe you can shine some light on this for me, because I find this really interesting. It's a color hoser card, right? They used to print a lot of those. They don't as much anymore. It's not the kind of card where you're just going to jam it into every single green deck. You don't play it in the main deck of every deck in every format. It just specifically happens to be really, really good against the things that are good, right? That's why that card's so problematic?
No. It's a green counterspell. It's part that draws a card. Like the fact that it cantrips no matter what happens is one of the reasons it's powerful, because even if you're playing against someone and they don't have the thing, you can just cycle it away, right? Like that's worst case scenario. It's able to draw a card off of it, I believe.
No, I believe it's not. I don't think it is.
So Veil of Summer is you draw a card if your opponent casts a blue or black spell.
That's what I
got
said.
it.
That's my point. So that's because that's what I thought too. I was
It's
like, okay.
not always cycle. If your opponent
Sure,
pulls
yeah,
out a red
yeah.
deck, then
Then you're out.
Because I was thinking like, okay, if it's cycled, then it'd be obvious. Then that's just this is an instant speed 1 green cantrip that in every deck and every matchup, if they're not playing the card you don't want to play against, you just play it on turn 1. Who cares? But the fact that they have to be playing blue or black, it's just a really powerful color hoser sideboard card. I don't understand why that is so good. What am I missing?
If you look at it's because green decks are so good. Like, and part of it is that the best thing to answer against green decks are going to be blue and black, right? We talked about how the best two colors, the only way to deal with a planeswalker is to destroy it or to discard it, right? Or sorry, not to destroy it, to make it go to thought seize it ahead of time, or to counter it. And this is the one card that makes it so that people can't do that. And so if you're having a planeswalker that you're trying to protect, Oko, you can now basically negate the best two ways that people are going to make it so you don't get value off of it. And then the last one is destroying it in play. Right now, the only color that can really do that are red and black. Black, this stops, and red can't get rid of walkers that come down with high loyalty, right? So like it makes it so hard to deal with that permanent type, not to mention creatures and other things that green is also been getting pushed really hard recently. And giving green a counter spell is a thing. I think one of the reasons this is just a miss, and it's more that like, they've been printing these color hoser cards my entire life, or since Magic has existed, and the green one is always just unplayable. Like I've played a ton of the black, white, and blue ones, from the original one.
For sure.
I'm forgetting what all of them are called.
I mean, you have cards like Raisin Roast, isn't that the red one?
Those are more recent ones. What's the original 3 from N10?
Flash
Or the
Freeze,
original 5.
You mean
Flash Freeze.
Death Grip, or Death Snap?
Yeah.
Deathmark.
Deathmark.
Celestial
Flash Freeze,
Purge.
and Celestial Purge.
Yeah.
Those are 3.
I played a lot of those cards in my sideboards.
In modern, like those are all playable cards. Combust is the red one, and then
those all
green is bad.
They all make sense. That's the thing, is I've always gotten that. It's just that I couldn't understand what made this one so good, and this one is entirely meta dependent. That's why it's so good.
I don't think it's necessarily meta dependent. I think meta has something to do with
I think
it.
it has to do with the power level of green being pushed as hard as it is.
Yeah, I think they're like, we want a green one to do something. We're sick of the 4 other colors having good answers, but because green can't answer anything, so it has a wall of text that I didn't even know what all the words did, and I've played with the card, and like, or I didn't even know when the cards are having. That's meta dependent, because just in general it's going to be good against decks that are good right now, but I think it's just as super powerful because they pushed it.
So, and then the third card that was banned in Standard is Once Upon a Time, and this one is really interesting to me. So, Once Upon a Time is an instant for green 1. Look at the top 5 cards of your library and put a land or a creature into your hand. If it's the first spell you've played this game, you may play it without paying its casting cost. So, this opens up a very interesting, quick conversation we can have. But they've printed cost reduced and free spells for years, dating back to like Force of Will days. I mean, we're talking in the early days of Magic, and they've done it all the way through things like the Force Cycle that we just saw in Modern Horizons, some of the bad cards from like Prophecy and Nemesis. There's been a billion different ones. Delve as a cost reducer. Yeah. You've seen a lot of these get banned over the years. There have been a lot of bannings focusing on exactly things like Phyrexian Mana and Delve. When this one got banned, I was sort of like, on the surface when they debuted this card, I didn't say this is going to get banned. I was like, I like this. I like the design of this card. I think it's cool. I'm glad it doesn't cost 1. I'm glad it costs 2, playing multiple copies. And then, of course, exactly the thing that you get worried about happened. The design space of cost reducers being too good and not good enough it's such a thin line.
Well, and Part of it also is when it's a cost reduction effect attached to something that's problematic. Almost all of the times it's been problematic, it's when a cost reduction effect is attached to, like, Treasure Cruise is problematic. Dig Through Time is problematic. Those are card filtering, card choosing, Power 9 level effects. Become Immense isn't problematic. Like, it's fine. I'm happy. Like, Infect is still not good.
It's been close at times.
It's been close, but like, it's not that's problematic. Gurmag Angler is fine. Like,
Yeah.
like even if they do the work to get a 1-mana 5/5, it's rarely going to happen until turn 2, turn 3, and like, and in Standard it wasn't even a problem. Like,
Right.
I think that like, it's really, and what we have here is, look at Modern. Not half the ban list, but there's a large number of cantrips on the ban list. At least 4. Off the top of my head, and me not really thinking too hard about it, between Gitaxian Pro, Preordained, Ponder, and
Treasure Cruise and
now Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time. That's 6. So like at least 6 on the ban list are cantrips.
I believe my tweet yesterday asking about this was saying that it's the cost reduce and the free and things that let you use something other than mana as a resource that allow you to gain card advantage. Those are the places that it always seems to slip up, because it's, obviously you can get an advantage by getting a cheap 5/5 and giving something +6/+6 instant speed is great, but drawing paying 2 life to draw a card with a sorcery and peak is, you're telling me, better than all of those things, which is astounding, but is true.
Well, and the other place I would say is interaction, right? Like, counter magic shouldn't be free. I'm gonna guess that we should. I would hope to God that Wizards of the Coast never prints free Thoughtseize.
They've never, but they haven't in any format. Correct me if I'm wrong here. There's never been a free counterspell ban in any format ever. There was no banning of Force or Daze or Thwart or.
Mental Misstep is the only one.
It's a good point. So Mental Misstep was the one, and Modern started with Mental Misstep banned, and it's banned in Legacy also.
It's banned everywhere.
Restricted in Vintage now, I think, but that's the only one.
Is it common or
Uncommon?
It's uncommon, so it's never in Pauper.
Okay, so that's fair, and that's them pushing that effect to its absolute limit. But yeah, it's an interesting space to think about,
Yeah.
which is like, if I'm designing cards, I mean, you obviously want to play with high power level. It makes players excited. It's one of the things that sells sets. Players like to do that, and that's kind of one of the things they talked about in this article, is that they like it when Magic is more powerful, when the game is more fun, when it is pushed. That makes for better Magic. We can talk about the article a little bit, because we alluded to it, but we haven't really acknowledged it yet. And I think this subject is a good place to go if you want to.
Well, but before we get into that, so what are your thoughts? I really want to quickly just talk about what are your thoughts on Force of Will being printed into Modern?
I've actually thought for quite a while Force of Will and Modern would be fine.
Yep.
I think honestly, there's an argument in some cases that Force of Negation would still be better, because hard casting Force of Will for 5 in Modern is like something that you often will never ever do.
Sure.
But you can actually hard cast a Force of Negation.
I've hard casted 3 mana counter spells in Modern.
Yeah, plenty of times.
Don't love when it happens, but
Now there is a power level of the format that's high enough that does use blue cards. That does get me a little worried. Like, I don't love the idea of a deck like Wurza just having Force of Will in it, just to have it. Like, you can just throw away this extra War of Invention that you don't need anymore to just not lose and combo off, or throw away this Thopter Foundry. It's just like easy, just win the game. And that's a little worrying, but also Force of Negation pretty much allows you to do that anyway.
I think one of the things that
need to.
that makes it less problematic is because Wizard has been so thorough, like destroying most blue cantrips in the format. You don't have the Force of Will Brainstorm combo that can become problematic. You also I think one of Modern's problems has been, at least this last 2 years, is that so many of the decks are on rails and there's no good answer to everything. And Force of Will is that, right? Like, that's what it is in Legacy. The reason Legacy functions is because no matter what, there's always a possibility for a deck to play Force of Will with control cards, and therefore, no matter what degenerate thing you're doing, they're able to be like, no, wait, stop. I don't care if it's turn 2, I don't care if it's turn 0, I don't care if it's turn 5. I can, at worst case scenario, always be like, no, stop storming off. Don't get Emrakul into play on turn 3.
It's still, my argument used to be that Modern's power level was significantly lower than Legacy, and there wasn't like these turn 0, turn 1, turn 2 wins with such consistency that Legacy felt like it had and Modern didn't. But nowadays, it actually doesn't feel like the formats are that different. It feels like the formats are about a turn different, maybe. Like, Modern can win very early, very quickly. And so I used to say, because Modern was a format that felt a little more fair, the card disadvantage from a card like Force of Will was damning enough that if you did it and you'd be down cards, you'd still probably lose. I don't know how true that is anymore. And
I think Modern still, even if you look at the Urza decks or the Wurza decks, a lot of them now are just mid-range Hate Bears decks that are comboing. They're not even comboing anymore, right? They're just like, I have a bunch of value engines, and putting decks that are value engines down a card can often be the difference between winning and losing. And if they have to discard their Warza, that puts them behind, right? Like that puts them really behind. I think that the other space, someone on the chat just mentioned this, that doing the Force of Negation ruling on Force of Will, like just printing a new card that is Force of Will, but has the only on your turn effect.
Yeah, right.
So you don't have the if it's your turn, you can protect your combo and you're going off effect to it, and it just can hit creatures and planeswalkers and instants and sorceries, but just like more of a stop your opponent card versus a protect my combo card, then I think that card could easily be printed in the Modern.
Totally, because I mean,
I
start thinking about the things in Modern that you would do, you know, on your turn, that having that Force of Will backup would change the game on. And it does get me a little concerned. I don't think like in a crazy way, but it doesn't feel like I want to put people in that position where, like an infect kill kind of a thing, where you just, you know, it's like the power that you can just protect your combo by discarding this blue card or exiling it. Now you just win the game out of nowhere. That doesn't, I think, make Modern that much more fun. The format's already pretty powerful, pretty fast.
Well, but at the same time, then the people opposed to them have a way to stop that to some extent. And now with Teferi in the world, Force of Will kind of doesn't do, like, with Teferi, the 3-mana one, like, fighting against Force of Will is that much easier for decks if they need to.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so
but then it makes those decks better. So, yeah, you go back and forth.
There are things, too. Like, for instance, if you are a blue deck and they get a God Start with their sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? If they get their God Start with Amulet, and they play their Primeval Titan, and your Force of Negation does absolutely nothing, that's not a very good feeling.
Right.
Your Force of Will protects you there. And that's the kind of thing. When they resolve Karn, you can stop it. When they resolve Wormcoil, you can't. I don't like Force of Negation is really good, but Force of Will costing 5, I think if you were to template the way you're talking about, it's probably fine.
Yeah.
I don't really think there's any issue with that. And the real question is, yes or no, should regular Force of Will just be reprinted in a Modern? Yes or no?
I think I'm on board with yes. I think I would rather what we've described, but if I had to choose between no Force of Will or Force of Will and this other idea doesn't exist, then I'm for yes, it should be.
Last question, Days. What about Days in Modern?
I think Days shouldn't be printed in the Modern. I think that card is almost exclusively used for like tempo-y negative effects to keep people off of doing things. I think Force of Will and the cost of it is so much less. It doesn't matter that I have to return an island to my hand. Even if it costs me 2 life in Modern because you're using Shocklands, discarding a card and losing a life is a much more real negative effect.
How much better does Merfolk get if Days is in Modern?
It gets good. I don't think the problems Merfolk is facing now is necessarily solved by Days, because I don't think Merfolk's inability to interact is its issue. I think the fact that it's a turn or 2 turns slower than other decks, and doesn't gain value the way that other decks do to get to the late game if it needs to get there. But yeah, so let's get on to talking about
this article.
The article, yeah.
Yeah, so the article basically says that, okay, we're looking at the last year of design. We're looking at what's happened. There was this sort of depowered level between Battle for Zendikar and M19, and we paid attention to that to those standard formats, and we decided that's not as fun. So we wanted to push the power level a little bit, and that's what you get with basically the last year. So everything, War of the Spark, Throne of Eldraine, M20, and there was another set reference in the article, I think. And what they were saying is that the exception to the rule, there's a couple cards, right? So they were like, we don't think Oko is indicative of the power level we were going for. It was a mistake that it was as good as it was. We don't necessarily think that Once Upon a Time is what we were going for. But the rest of what you've been seeing is what we were going for, and that's what you should expect out of Standard moving forward, because we think more powerful Magic cards are more fun Magic cards.
And I think that's what we're kind of seeing, even like with stuff like Emery. Like Emery is a very powerful card.
Really good.
You get like kind of Chandra, 3-mana Chandra. That's where I want 3-mana Planeswalkers to be at. The 3-mana Chandra from M20 is amazing.
The
card's
uncommon
really
one?
fun.
The card's nuts.
It has like a medium Snapcaster Mage effect. It doesn't protect itself. The rare one.
It's a rare one.
Yeah, the uncommon one's 4.
Okay.
Uncommon, which actually, and the amount of games I've played with it, not the worst card either, but 3-mana Chandra.
You're talking about the one that makes 2 1/1s that you can flash back and spell?
Snapcaster Mage effect, yeah.
Love that spell.
It's like really fun, and that's part of it, because it's proactive, right? It's not really controlling the board as much. It's much more about getting in there, doing things. It doesn't put tokens in the play to protect itself. I think that's kind of the target I would have for a 3-mana walker, but I do think in general, and even this is with Modern Horizons, yes, Hogak was a mistake. Yes, Urza could be tweaked a little bit different. Yes, maybe Wrenn and 6 and Legacy was maybe a little bit too targeted. But in general, the power level of the set is really exciting. It does a bunch of new stuff. It's adding new stuff to the format. In Standard even, Ixalan sucked. I mean, I was so excited for that set. I was so excited for Pirates versus Dinosaurs and versus Merfolk and even Vampire Conquistadors. And like where we ended up was kind of just like, what's the best? I think Unclaimed Territory and the Freebooter are the only two cards from the entire block that like were very influential in Modern, and both of them are like fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you look at Magic a couple different ways, the one way to look at it is, okay, if you're a type A Spike Standard player who's super on Arena, he drafts a lot, that's basically what he does, right? Or anyone, I shouldn't say he, but like the person who is into it, that's what they do. Mm-hmm. Then you'll take what's given to you. You'll play Ixalan Standard, you'll play Theros Standard, you'll play Throne of Eldraine Standard. It doesn't really matter because it's all going to be within the confines of what's available to you and the other players. But if you're anyone else, if you're interested in any older format, if you like to play Brawl, if you want to play Commander, if you're into Modern, if you like your pet formats that you play with your friends, like Highlander Gauntlet, then you ultimately want the cards that are being printed into Standard to at least be interesting enough to go beyond the borders of just the Standard format. I was so excited for Pirates, and when Pioneer got announced, I was like, oh, I can probably build a sick Pirates deck. This will be really fun. Finally, a place I can play Pirates that's not Modern. And I was like,
nope.
No, it still sucks. These cards are all pretty bad. Like, they just aren't good enough. I remember trying to build on Arena. What was the 4-mana Time Stream Navigator? The one where it goes to the bottom of your library, you get an extra turn.
Field of Ruin was also an Ixalan block and was really good.
Field of Ruin, yeah. And I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, like I should be able to build like a pretty cool Pioneer Time Stream Navigator deck that can loop this and take a lot of extra turns. Like, no, this card's just really bad. This is just not as fun as I want it to be. I better use other cards from other sets.
Well, and I almost want to say, go back to the point you're making earlier about a Standard player not even caring. I think they care. I think Standard is boring when things are just like, oh, I have mid-range dirtily creatures and some removal spells that's mediocre, and I have like a bunch of 5-mana walkers that literally have plus draw a card, minus remove a creature, ultimate win the game. Like, I think that universe is not fun for people. I think when cool specific strategies end up being a fun combo of cards that are doing really well, that I think is when people start having fun, when they're doing exciting new stuff. And Standard got to a little bit of a samey moment, and that's where we had like 3 years of Standard where we're just like, okay, mono red's the best deck.
Yeah.
Because just like those are the cards that like no matter what you do, they're either unplayable or they're good, and so we printed enough good ones that this is just going to be the best deck for 2 years in a row.
Yeah, I think like looking at some of the spectacle stuff that we have right now with the red cards, like, I think Light Up the Stage and Skewer the Critics. That's design space that I'm stoked on. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I think is so cool and such a great combination of like high power, good payoff, but not just overtly powerful on the surface level.
Or what's the enchantment that lets you cast that for free that I'm just blanking on?
Oh, the 4-mana one.
Yeah, no. The one that you get
Experimental Frenzy?
No,
two
new
free
one.
spells a turn.
Fires
But you can't cast.
Fires of Invention.
Yeah, Fires of Invention. Like, that card is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, that's like so cool and powerful, but also like all you're doing is casting like Liliana's, so whatever.
Yeah.
And like that's awesome. Like, that's the type of power level that I love seeing new stuff on. I love new interaction that's powerful. Like we talked, the hot take we released this week was about, can Lightning Bolt be printed in the Pioneer? And I think Lightning Bolt would be fine in Standard right now. And also maybe something they need, because with the amount of power level they have with the Planeswalkers that they're printing and the creatures that they're printing, you need a good 1-mana removal spell. And I don't think Path to Exile, I think Path to Exile is too far in one direction, but Lightning Bolt is such a classic card and something that would be really exciting, and just cool removal, cool creatures and effects, just like actually doing stuff that's exciting is good for Standard, it's good for Pioneer, it's good for Historic, it's good for Commander. Like, literally every format wants cool stuff, and if they were, I'm happy they're leaning into it. And oh no, worst case scenario, we have to ban a few cards because we went a little too far over the line.
Let me ask you a question. So, instant speed, 1 mana, answer to a creature. Path to Exile is the last one we got that was like insane top level. I guess Fatal Push is also good, but this Exiles for 1 mana.
Sure.
Is it possible that any color, even if there was a drawback associated, can get an instant speed 1 mana spell that handles a Planeswalker?
I think White should get it.
You think White should get Exile, a Planeswalker, instant speed?
I would
1?
love a like Path to Exile that removed the Planeswalker and a creature with maybe a slightly like they get 3 treasure tokens or 2 treasure tokens or something along those lines.
It accelerates them or something.
But only quickly. Like, it doesn't give them a land forever, but maybe it gives them treasures or gives, something along those lines.
Sure.
I think that would be fine. I mean, we talked a lot about this during last week's episode. Was like, one idea someone came up with was like instant speed Pithing Needle, right? Where it's 1 white mana artifact, has flash. When it enters, when you cast it, choose a card. It loses all of its activated abilities. I think that would be cool.
What if it was like a...
Or
what
choose
if
a planeswalker or creature if you don't want it to hit lands, because fetch lands exist.
What if it was like a... What if... Oh, just a quick shout out to Kronkatong, loving the sound quality today. Thank you.
Nice.
We're working hard on that. That's something that matters a lot to us. What if it was like a Pongify effect for Planeswalker? So like it'd be like white, exile target Planeswalker. Its controller puts a creature token into play with converted mana cost equal to the mana cost, or sorry, with power and toughness equal to the mana cost. So
What about 1 white, target planeswalker becomes a 3/3 elk?
yeah, white, like that'd be like a blue-green hybrid card or something.
Yeah,
like
it's
that?
something maybe 3 mana, does it every turn.
Yeah.
I think that would be fine. Like, or do they just get a creature equal to converted mana cost? Then that's like a real cost if you try answering their turn 1 play with your 1 mana answer.
Yeah, right.
I'd be fine with like weird Beast Within.
Yeah, if like 1 mana, so like for 1 white, like your Jace the Mind Sculptor becomes a 4/4. I mean, it still sucks for me, but like it's way easier to deal with than Jace the Mind Sculptor, you know? And it's a cheap answer.
And they still got the Brainstorm. They still got the Fate Seal you, making
Yeah.
it so you don't draw that 1/1 card.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. This design space we're talking about. This is all design space. I'm sure they're all talking about because
Sure.
that as you said, there's probably planeswalkers coming out over the course of the next year that are going to be hopefully not the same level as Oko, but
If I'm Wizards, my take from this year is probably 3 things. One is I need to be way more careful with 3 and 2 mana walkers, specifically in like how much loyalty they can gain. 2, I need to make sure if we're going to continue doing static abilities that these are abilities that, this is what I'm hoping I guess they get, abilities that are more proactive, and the ones that are like weird hate cards aren't the things that we focus on, because that's when we start getting people just in tournament play getting warnings. And 3, that we need to print a significantly more and more diverse way for every single color to be able to interact with planeswalkers. If they took that to heart, if those 3 things, then even if they do print powerful planeswalkers, who cares?
Yeah.
I don't think the gameplay of a planeswalkers is inherently problematic. I think the problem is though, like half the colors don't have good tools to fight them. The walkers that they printed in War of the Spark have these weird negative effects that are really hard to keep track of and are problematic and probably too powerful. And 3, Oko just like get your numbers right on 3 to 2 mana walkers. A 3 or 2 mana walker is so hard to interact with decks because they can't attack it that early. They don't have enough bulk to be able to deal with a walker that early in the game. They have to be very careful. And I think the article they wrote was kind of them saying we've learned that lesson. We learned that we need to be careful on these things.
I think if you look at any two-year period in Magic's history going back to 1993, there is an overpowered card that broke the rule and was pushed and ended up being too good. It's something they're going to do until the end of time. Like, only because it's not fun to print stuff that's really weak. It's really fun to print stuff that's on the line or too good. And sometimes you have to ban cards. I mean, as they said, the power level is close to what they want. These 2 cards specifically, maybe 3, are the ones that were a little beyond what they wanted to be. And that's what we're going to have. But in general, like my cards to be more powerful. Let's read a couple people in the chat.
I want one thing to say on Once Upon a Time. Do you think that the template of if this is the first card you're casting this turn, play it for free, is now in a net negative? Wizards will be afraid of using this card, or a net like this is still a cool mechanic, we just don't want to put on a cantrip?
No, I think it's pretty clear when you talk about cost reducers and free cards, as we said a few minutes ago. It's card advantage is the place where they make mistakes. So if it gets you a card into your hand, if it's a spell that triggers, that's going to be harder to do. If this is the first spell you play at Lightning Bolts, if it's 2 mana, if it's Lightning Strike, except you get it for free if it's the first spell you played, how is that a problem? Like
so yeah, would you be interested in like super ley lines that are like ley lines that have to be the first spell you cast that turn versus in your opening hand?
Like that space doesn't bother me. I'm fine if you play with that space, because I think again, if you get away from stuff that's giving you those triggers and extra cards and stuff like that, I don't think it's as much of a problem. And I think that's cool design space. Sure. It slows the game down in a way.
I mean, Lightning Strike even like could be a little over the line, but like I'd love just like a 1/1.
Just a 1/1 in green for 1. Maybe it's an elf.
1/1 for like 2. Yeah, it's like something that like an elf. Yeah, that like if this is the first spell you cast, it comes down for free as a 1/1. That would be like cute and like see, is that too powerful? Because that's like as basic as you get. Arbor Elf is generally slightly too powerful. Memnite is slightly less powerful than good, so it'd be interesting to see.
I mean, if that card was 2 mana Arbor Elf and you could get it for free if it was the opening card. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. But the thing is, then again, like if it's an elf deck You get the 1 for free on turn 1, and then you draw all these 2-mana ones, but at that point you have all the extra mana, so you don't care anyway. Like I don't know. Maybe for standard it'd be okay. We'll see. But
or like an artifact creature that or it does something. Maybe it scries when it enters play.
Yeah. A couple things I want to read out here. We've got Andre Height in here. Gitaxian Probe wasn't broken, was it?
I mean, it's banned in every format it's legal in or restricted. It's banned in Pauper, right? That's the one that I might miss out. I guess Commander players can play it, but every 4 of non-singleton format it's banned in. So I feel like Gitaxian Probe was too good.
Yeah, definitely. The Big Intellectual is a 3/3 elk better or worse than a 3/3 elephant?
Worse.
An elk is worse than an elephant?
Yeah.
Is there elephant tribal? Am I forgetting something?
Well, it's definitely not elk tribal.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's net loss.
I think
net
elephants
even.
are cooler.
I mean, that's just a subjective answer. You just like elephants more than elk?
No. Elephants are objectively cooler.
Oh.
How many people go to a zoo to see elk? How many people go to... There are elk in Africa. There are elephants in Africa. One of those two things is part of the Big Five.
I've been to many zoos to see elk.
I disagree.
Yeah, it's not true. Not true at all.
Objectively, elephants sell more than elks of everything.
It's a Trap says settle the wreckage. That is a really, really good card to come out of that block.
So I do think that we were wrong that and I actually have a disagreement with Wizards in general that standard sets. I feel like they think standard doesn't affect modern as much as it does, and players think that, right? Like often players are like, "Oh, standard sets don't matter much to modern," but we did an episode, and you can go find it, of what the best cards from every set was, and I think only 2 sets of the last 10 years weren't extremely influential in some way. We're also missing Search for Azcanta.
Search is really good.
That's the big one. And Settle sees some play. Search is a real card. So is Field of Ruin. So there are cards from that block that saw play. Even Dragon's Maze, when we went back and forth, not only is there what's the elemental that makes elementals there's voice resurgence, but there's the split cards that Wear and Tear.
Yeah, Wear and Tear was really good. Yeah.
So there even that set, which is classically derided as one of the worst. I think Born of the Gods actually we got to, and it's bad. Born of the Gods has nothing. That's
we'd have to listen to the full episode to try to remember. Last comment here we're going to share before we wrap out the last part of the episode. Eric Frederick, member of Action Industries, big salute to you. Says I'm a traitor, but he's being supportive. Well, thank you. He's speaking to me. Says Ben is a traitor. That's a schmodown thing.
It's the beard, right? He needs to get rid of it, shave it.
Playoff beard, man. Got to win this. Got to win this title.
I'm in so many top 4s of fantasy football leagues, and I know nothing about the sport.
Yeah, my Kesco performance was bad, but I am a top 2 seed in Liquor League for the back-to-back years. I may be the first back-to-back winner in that league.
Nice, congratulations!
That's exciting, thank you.
I guess the final statement for the day, as far as power level in standard and in sets that Wizards has printed, I think we both agree that it's good. In general, Wizards pushing the boundaries, comes up with more exciting things, does more exciting stuff for the formats, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what's in the agenda. I mean, kind of the sets we've seen so far all look really great. The next set, Return to Theros, I know were some leaks, so we know some of the mechanics, and some of the mechanics look really exciting. And going forward past that, we just have more and more great stuff. So I'm really excited for the future of Magic and the power level that they're talking towards. But I do understand that to do that, you're going to have to break some eggs. And
So I want to talk a little bit about additional content in a second here. You're streaming, and the streaming I'm about to start doing.
Sure.
But before we do that, I do want to remind everybody here, go to patreon.com/theMMcast if you want to support the show. That is the best thing you can do to support. If you haven't already, click subscribe on the YouTube video. If you're listening or watching, do that. But we are, developing the Patreon. We're sharing the full unedited videos as a stream to all patrons, so do that. And thank you, everybody, for your support to this point. It means a lot, and it will continue to mean a lot to us if you want to keep doing that. But I want to just talk about, because you've been streaming Brawl a bunch.
Yes. Now I'm taking a week off because of Thanksgiving, and I was in San Francisco this last weekend. But yeah, I've been streaming Brawl at least once a week, and then yeah.
I'm building a Brawl deck right now with that 2/3. It's the Esper Fairy for 4, the 2/3 flyer, Death Touch, Lifelink. Whenever you cast an artifact or enchantment, you get a 1/1. What's that card called? Lissa.
She's the Brawl. She's from the Brawl pre-commander deck, pre-con deck.
Oh, is she?
Yeah, she's one of the 4. It was her, the Dragon King. the knight in Mardu and the book guy.
Okay, gotcha.
Who's
So
really excited about Chulain. I know his name.
So I burned like
Corvold is the dragon.
I burned like all my wild cards to get like the cards for this deck, and
Okay.
I haven't played it yet. But I'm gonna start doing that really soon. I got OBS on my computer.
Nice.
I stream. I played Arena last night, so I'm definitely. I almost just turned it on last night to see if I could stream for the first time. I think I may just do it tonight.
Okay.
I may just give it a shot.
So live stream when we're normally streaming. Historically, Ben will be streaming tonight.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a shot. Alila, says Antoine Gurdon. Thank you.
So that is one thing. I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, but I'll say it now. For our Patreon, if you are listening to this now and you are like, oh, I wish I could catch the live stream, but am working at that point. On Patreon, the whole live stream with the pre-show and all the dumb arguments and pre-versions of the hot takes will be on our Patreon, available to Patreon members. Anything over, I think, a $5 level, you get access to the raw feed. And we are live streaming every week at 1 p.m. That's the plan. That might be a little earlier, might be a little later, but we're aiming for 1 p.m. We'll also be releasing the edited version of this video. So if you're watching this right now and you want card art or whatever, and you want to see more of an higher audio quality, you don't have all the distracting stuff around us, that should be coming out every Thursday.
Yep.
And then we'll have small mini videos every Monday called Hot Takes. Make sure to keep an eye out for them. They're really fun. Likely this week's will be that Force of Will conversation.
Yeah, more likely.
There's a conversation on should Force of Will be in Modern, so that'll be coming out on Monday. And then obviously audio comes out Wednesday. So thank you guys so much for listening. You can follow me on Twitch at Kes Wiley, or at Kesko, but everywhere else at Kes Wiley on Twitter, Facebook, everything. You can see it down there. Make sure to give this a like, because the more likes these videos have, the better they do. Yeah,
give it a like. Thanks for watching, guys. You guys can find me at Ben Bateman Media on Twitter and Instagram. If you're a fan, by the way, of any of the other stuff I do with Action Industries with Andrew Guy, we have a Patreon debate show we've started doing with patrons only on Sunday nights, wherein one of us debates with 4 patrons a movie-related topic, and the other one judges it. So you get to hang out in kind of a Google Hangout-style debate. And this Sunday, I'm actually going to be debating with 4 of you patrons what is the best Martin Scorsese movie of all time. Last week, it was the best comedy of the 90s. The week before that, it was the greatest Jack Nicholson role. So it's been super fun. It's a great way for us to interact with you guys and get to know you. So if you do happen to be a fan of that stuff, you don't know about it, go check that out. Submit your stuff there. Go watch an episode. We have the latest one up on the Action Industries YouTube.
Yeah, cool.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Ruben.